Goodbyes are hard. I still don't really understand how to deal with finishing a game I love. You invest a lot of time into the game, you explore every nook and cranny of a beautifully crafted world, the story hits all the right beats, you feel a weird sort of attachment to your crew of companions, and then the screen goes blank and you see your reflection on the TV for a split second before the credits roll. Frankly, it gets rough. There are so many occasions where I've thought things like, why can't I find other games like this? Will there ever be a sequel for this? Well, time for another playthrough. Oh my god, I don't want to say goodbye to my friends. Don't make me say goodbye to my waifu! Different people will react in many ways across multiple games, and I'm sure that every single one of you watching this video has experienced these varying emotions at least once in your life. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't really get better. I've played a lot of games, I've tried to fill holes left by those games with other games, but if you play me any music from Okami, I'm 8 years old again and bawling my goddamn eyes out. So if you're here to drown your sorrows after finishing a game you love, or if you're here to see how many times I've drowned in my own sorrows, then grab your snacks and get comfortable, because we're gonna talk about the games I've had to say goodbye to and how they cause post-game depression. To get you into the right mood for this, we're gonna start off with a cult classic, a game that helped me get through a tough period in my life and changed how I saw games entirely. Undertale is very important to me because it was one of the first games I played when I went to university in a foreign country and was finding it tough to settle in. It was there for me when I was alone, in a difficult long-distance relationship that didn't work out, and miles away from home. It's a game that was actually there for me when nobody else was. Undertale is deeply thoughtful and incredibly profound. It has some of the best dialogue ever written, a fantastic story, and companions and NPCs teeming with so much personality that it's part of the actual gameplay. What's surprising is that it creates a sense of attachment to the game's world in roughly 6 to 12 hours. So much so that it made me an emotional mess when I completed it and sent me back to reality with a gaping hole in my heart. And it does this by making you the main character. You see, most games will flesh out their protagonists so that you're attached to them and make you care for their relationships with other characters. But when you're the main character, interactions feel a lot more meaningful because any consequences are a direct result of your own actions and not those of the protagonist you're meant to play as, which are still technically your own, but I hope you know what I mean. And with how in-depth the range of player choice and dialogue branches out in Undertale, your first playthrough is truly your own. In this playthrough, you'll meet companions who are warm, charming, funny, over the top, and I want to say unique. There's a lot of dogs, there's a lot of frogs, ghosts, anime airplanes, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of suspense, there's a lot of drama. Everything's so meticulously designed to make you adore the world you're in. You are a human after all, a foreigner in a world of monsters. You're not really home. Your path to freedom becomes an adventure, and while you make more friends along the way, you're constantly warned by everyone that the final obstacle you face is their vicious king of the monsters named Asgore. But the closer you get to his domain, the more you realize he isn't really as daunting as everyone says. He's experienced betrayal and heartbreak, and it's just doing what he has to achieve freedom for his kind. This playthrough is already quite impactful upon completion, but it still feels like it has a lot of loose ends. The pacifist playthrough is the reason anyone who's ever played this game comes away with post-game depression. In this run, you're not allowed to kill anyone. Not the fodder enemies, not your companions, and in turn you get some of the most funny and creative encounters when trying to peacefully resolve conflict. You also get to spend more quality time with your companions through a series of dates. Because the dialogue is so well written and the humor is so effective, you're laughing along with the game. But there's also a deeper truth you start to uncover, a truth more shocking than the one you learned in your first playthrough, and shit truly hits the fan as you play one of the most incredible final boss encounters a game has to offer. This whole theme around the power of friendship comes into view. Your companions are all rooting for you, and in the most Naruto way possible, the main villain of the game becomes your friend in an extremely touching moment. Saying goodbye to this game is so difficult. As parasocial as this sounds, you made friends who made you feel welcome in a place so unfamiliar to you, so far away from home, and letting that go is hard. For me, it was probably harder because I could have really used that warm welcome when I set foot on such unfamiliar grounds. But enough of my sob story. For this next bit, I want to talk about a couple of different games united by a common theme that contributes towards making you feel empty inside when finishing a game you love. And that theme is something I like to call meaningful companionship. I know I called it parasocial just moments ago, but a lot of my favorite games that I finished cleverly use well-written companions and meaningful moments to create an artificial bond. You'll generally feel attached to more characters when the game is a lot longer, and the shorter games will focus on fewer characters. But if the writing is bad, characters lifeless, and the friendship's fake, then it doesn't matter how long your game is or how many companions you put in there. I'll probably have in-game depression rather than post-game depression. I'm sure there are a ton of games with incredible examples of meaningful companionship, but I want to highlight some of the games that made me obsess over my pixelated friends, starting with Persona 5. When I first finished this game back in 2017, I felt very empty. I had switched schools that summer and left some of my best friends behind as I moved to a completely different city. And Persona 5 helped me cope by putting me in the shoes of a high schooler who had, ironically, also moved into a brand new environment and a new school. And of course, he made friends. Friends I remember all the names of despite not having touched the game in 7 odd years. Ryuji, An, Makoto, Yusuke, Haru, and Futaba. Morgana? No, fuck Morgana. I hate Morgana. Yeah. But over the course of this roughly 80-hour adventure, these companions were introduced into the story gradually, giving Joker time to meaningfully establish relationships with 1 or 2 characters as the game begins, and then lets you focus on doing the same with other companions as they're unlocked. And what's really fun is the relaxed nature of the game. Yes, you and your friends live alter egos known as the Phantom Thieves, but a lot of the core gameplay loop is just spending regular days as a high schooler. You go to class, you study, you hang out with your friends or go on dates. The game gradually opens up more activities for you and areas to hang with your peeps, and what really sells the game is the fact that everyone is so welcoming to Joker. But you still have to work to make them like you. They have all these different personalities, and you start to learn how to create chemistry with each of them. It feels earned rather than granted, and the payoff is that you have special bonds or moves together when you switch over to the Phantom Thieves section of the game. What also helps sell the aspect of meaningful companionship is the fact that the game pits you against society as part of an incredible story beat. Nobody counts on you, nobody believes you, nobody likes you, except the group of friends that you work so hard to create connections with. And this trauma bonding, let's call it that, brings you closer to the team because nobody else has your back but your friends. Towards the end of the game, after you've gone through a ton of shit together, there's this whole really bittersweet yet rewarding part of the game where you have to say goodbye to your friends. And depending on how much time you spend fostering your relationships, you get pretty heartfelt goodbyes. And if there wasn't already a hole in my heart before, well, there is one now. I miss this game. Speaking of heartfelt goodbyes, I want to move on to a game that holds an extremely special place in my heart. There's no sad backstory behind this one, it's just a game that is, without a doubt, the single greatest entry in its franchise. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon: Explorers of Sky. Pokemon fans, I imagine as a kid or preteen, we've dreamt of playing as the Pokemon instead of the trainer. And Pokemon Mystery Dungeon lets us do just that, while having one of the greatest adventures in all of video games. Your chosen Pokemon is accompanied by a best friend Pokemon. You join a guild as explorers and go on incredible expeditions together, all of which would practically mean nothing if not for how amazing the writing is. You're welcomed into the guild by a charming group of Pokemon, you have a daily routine of accomplishing tasks, eating together and sleeping side by side. And as the story progresses, there are mysteries that start to pop up, anomalies in the world, new characters and villains, and legendary Pokemon you encounter as you set off on expeditions. I think being a big Pokemon fan plays a huge part here too. Being able to recognize many of your favorite Pokemon as characters written into the game's story, especially the legendaries, add to the childlike experience of amazement. And having a best friend to experience all of this with ties it up together nicely. What's surprising is how big a part the story plays in the game. It's the kind of writing you expect to see in a full-fledged AAA game. The twists and turns can get dark, there are themes of betrayal and major heartbreak, which is something I've never expected of Pokemon games. As a child, I was never really prepared for what was around the corner. It was always edge-of-your-seat stuff, and there are times when you and your partner could only rely on each other. There's a lot of meaningful dialogue intertwined between the story's themes, all carefully crafted so as to distract you from the sucker punch the game sneakily delivers during the climax. And I'm not ashamed to say I fucking bawled my eyes out, because who expects a roller coaster of emotions in a Pokemon game? Ultimately, there's a point where you have to say a very painful goodbye. The music is a major mood setter. Every element of the game is doing its best here to make you tear up. It's a classic technique used by Pixar films. You experience a high, and before it even settles in, it's immediately taken away from you and places you at an all-time low before ultimately making everything okay again. I don't even remember exactly how much time I put into this game, just that I played it till the end and then played through the post-game and then the post-post game, and I refused to move on from it for the longest time. I remember constantly googling whether more Mystery Dungeon games would ever come out. There was a Chimchar-shaped void in my heart because he was my best friend that entire game. 14 years later, the only reason I still have any loosely related Pokemon interest is because of the Mystery Dungeon series. It's a special type of post-game depression that keeps you checking up on whether a franchise is making any changes, because I hadn't touched a Pokemon game since then until Legends Arceus. I don't know. In all the games I've mentioned up until now, there's a more subtle factor that causes that feeling of emptiness when completing a game that I like to call leaving your mark. This usually is related to games where your choices can have consequences on the main story, but the subtlety that I want to talk about comes from the fact that there are games where the outcome of the story is limited, and you can still leave your mark. Undertale, for example, makes the player character change the monster's perception of humans and helps them escape the underworld. Persona 5 causes you to completely change behaviors of corrupted individuals. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon helps you solve the mysteries of why time seems to be stopping in certain areas in the world. Very ordinary player characters going on to achieve extraordinary feats. But leaving your mark can also be as simple as helping another person out, and I think we know where I'm going with this. So let's head straight into Red Dead Redemption 2. It's hard to put into words what truly makes this game so memorable. Is it the writing? Is it the immersive world? Is it the story? Or is it a mix of everything? I've still only played this game to completion once, so please bear with me as I try to unravel what really causes this game to leave its own mark. Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't a game that's black and white, it's almost always in the grey. Arthur Morgan is an outlaw, him and his gang are on the run, but just as the name of the game implies, it is his tale of redemption. Arthur is an ordinary man, just like you or me. He doesn't have any grand ambitions or ulterior motives, he is simply trying to do right by his gang and remain loyal to Dutch. Along the way, Arthur is forced to make choices. They may or may not always be the morally right thing to do, but for a duty-bound man like him, anything goes as long as his compatriots are safe. That sense of duty extends towards some of the side quests you encounter, and in these moments, you start to feel duty-bound. Arthur's reputation during these open-world segments is entirely in your control, but the quest design and the closure you get upon completing them are a neat psychological trick to try and keep you on the path of honor, unless of course you're hell-bent on ruining Arthur's reputation. Red Dead Redemption 2 also does an immaculate job at creating these standstill moments. Whether you're sightseeing or hunting or in the camp with the gang, it almost feels like the game is alive inside your console. As someone who enjoys hiking and camping myself, it's these standstill moments that have me reflect on my own personal life. And I feel like Red Dead Redemption 2 does a great job at simulating these moments so you can reflect on Arthur's choices. Ultimately, there comes a very climactic point in the game which results in the player realizing that Arthur's decisions suddenly carry a lot of weight. How long will the gang keep running from its fate? The decisions Arthur has been making start to catch up to him. They affect his relationship with Dutch. His sense of duty is a lot more complicated, and for the player, a moment of reflection feels inevitable. What is more important here? Reaching the conclusion of the main story without leaving behind a legacy, or living in the moment, helping as many people as you can in the side quests, and truly leaving your mark? I remember deciding to spend my time helping NPCs a lot more after learning what I knew during the climax, and when I decided to progress the main story to completion, I was pleasantly surprised to find I had truly helped people during the epilogue. It's a very weighty and impactful quest designed by Rockstar, and while Red Dead Redemption 2 may not be one of my favorite games ever created, Arthur Morgan remains the greatest protagonist I have ever played as, and his sense of duty for me personally left its mark. Post-game depression is rough, and although there are several other games I would have loved to talk about, and I still might do in future videos, I hope you found yourself relating to my experiences, and I would love to hear your own in the comments. While there's no true fix for this feeling of emptiness that comes after completing amazing games, part of me has accepted that there will always be greater reward in playing more and more fulfilling titles. You will enjoy a lot more, you will feel sad a lot more, but the journey is what we're all grateful to experience, and part of the journey is the end. Hadouken!